Okie dokie, everybody. And we are live. Good morning. Good morning, everybody, here for another round of Astro-Babble. Happy Monday, happy Memorial Day, in honor of all those who have served. Thank you. And yeah, so we're here with 8 more charts, and we're going to take these 8 charts that you all have donated so kindly to the live stream, and we are going to look at them and read them and check them out and talk about some astro stuff and talk about why my hair's a little bit messy this morning. And no, we're not going to talk about that. But if you or your friends or family would like to be on the live stream, all you need to do is send your birth date, place, and exact birth time to the live stream, and we will get them on the list. But until then, now is now, then is then. That's your wisdom for the morning. Let's go ahead and pull up the first chart and get to interpreting. So Dylan is our first chart. Dylan was born 4:23 a.m. in Florida. Let's take a peek. So we've got Mars, Venus, and Jupiter and the ascendant, all Taurus in the first house of self. That's some pretty heavy Taurus energy. Even though Dylan is a Gemini, Sun in Gemini in the second house, as well as Mercury in Gemini in the second, the Lord of the chart is far stronger than the Sun, and even the Moon, which is in Virgo, in the fifth. So I think that Dylan has this like super Taurus energy about him in terms of having Venus in Taurus, the ruler of the chart, in the first house of self, as well as anytime that we see Jupiter in the first house of self, the personality is going to be bigger. The personality is going to double in size. But Mars in Taurus is also here as well, which I think is really interesting, because Mars is technically in his fall, opposing his natural rulership in Scorpio, but is co-present with Venus, the ruler of the chart, at 29 degrees of Taurus. So I think that there's this massive amount of groundedness in Dylan's chart. I think that there's this practicality, especially with the Virgo moon, that's just off the charts. Extremely, extremely focused this time around on developing a solid sense of self, and really making sure that, although stubbornness can definitely get in the way, because nobody knows stubbornness like a good Taurus, especially with all this Taurus in the first house. Is absolutely ridiculous. I would treat him like a Taurus. That's kind of the crux of it. But we do have some interesting dynamics in Dylan's chart that need to be remediated as well. All of this earth-based strength also comes with air-based weakness. So we have the Sun in Gemini, but the Sun is very, very close to the South Node. Actually, with a couple days back, no, it's a little bit too far off. Normally, when somebody is born during an eclipse, the moon and the sun are either opposing each other or conjoined, that new moon, full moon, by the north and south node. But I think if we scaled it back a couple days, it might have been a very partial solar eclipse, just before Dylan was born, a couple days before. But still, whenever the sun touches that south node, it really drains the life force from the sun. The personality is compromised because the solar radiance is not forward, it's not present. Even with Mercury, the lord of the chart, or the lord of the second house, ruling the sun, being in the house with the sun, Mercury is still combust. It's only 5 degrees away from the sun, so Mercury is getting burnt up. And the south node itself is just draining all of that life force from the sun. So the sun itself, the ego, the sense of self, definitely not as strong as it could be. But we have all this interesting Taurus, Earth, and Virgo moon stuff that's happening in the chart that I think really makes up for that. The issue, though, is understanding, especially because Dylan's self-esteem is directly related to the second house of finance. So if financial wellness, especially with the South Node here, isn't Dylan's purview, and Dylan starts to run into financial hardship, self-esteem will start to go down the toilet. But also, Dylan tends to comfort himself through physical possessions, which is also something to be aware of as well. North Node being in the eighth, we're really trying to strive towards the eighth house's topics of understanding death, taxes, estates, business, other people's money, especially with Jupiter in the first ruling that North Node in the eighth. I think understanding that money is something that will need to be mastered to some extent, but especially working with other people's money. Saturn in Libra retrograde in the sixth. He's not going to know what he's going to want to do for the first 30 years of life. That's perfectly fine. I wouldn't waste money on college. I would only start to throw Dylan into trade schools and really understand what it is that he's good at, what it is he's passionate about. He has this killer work ethic that's just absolutely fabulous, but again, this sense of stubbornness that tends to make a lot of jobs difficult when they don't need to be. Let's see. There's potential to travel with work. Travel won't be travel and teaching and higher education, definitely part of the scheme, but that won't be unlocked until halfway through the life, around 50. And then this Virgo moon in the fifth, like a lot of what Dylan really, really enjoys is the tinkering process. There's this creative energy, but when Virgo gets creative, Virgo likes to make spreadsheets and organize and feng shui and play with little gears and tools and work with microscopes and things that are a little bit more nuanced and fine-tuned. So understanding that Dylan isn't necessarily one of those people who's going to want to be famous for famous' sake, or paint this lovely picture. It's going to be tinkering and building and getting some of those earthy placements to activate, as opposed to kind of flashier, bolder things. Because again, all those flashy, bold things in the chart are definitely diminished, and the earth starts to take over pretty readily. But Dylan's going to need to learn how to break through that and actually understand some of the emotional ramifications of going outside of the comfort zone. Cool. So that's that. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for jumping on. Albert, Ann, Alicia, Sue, I appreciate everybody jumping on Instagram as well. We're running through 8 charts this morning. If you would like to be a part of the the queue, just send your birth date, place, and time to me via private message, and I will add you to the queue. Let's talk about Christine. Christine is chart number 2. She was born 1:34 a.m. in Baltimore. And again, we have 3 planets on the ascendant, just like the last chart, except this time they're all in Sagittarius. So we have ascendant in Sagittarius, as well as Saturn, Mars, and Uranus, all in Sagittarius in the first house of self. I personally don't like to see this combo for a couple reasons. Saturn and Mars are both known as the malefic planets. They tend to bring a little bit more chaos, a little bit more, especially energetically, dryness into the physical tissues of the body. And with all of this happening in Sagittarius, the sign of the liver, the hips, the vessels, we need to be very, very aware of those body systems, and especially understand that those need to be taken care of as a first priority. But energetically, we find that there's a lot of fierceness in Christine's personality, but also unpredictability with Uranus here. Uranus is that planet that tends to be associated with things like natural disasters and upheaval, and energetically, it just makes people a little bit too spontaneous, especially in that mutable fire sign of Sag. We have too much of the wrong components personality wise, and there may be there are totally. Okay, I can see why that is. I can see why all of this is happening. So Christine, one thing to just be aware of is all of this spontaneity, all of this wanting to move forward and wanting to see and wanting to experience and wanting to create massive amounts of not just space but joy in the life, and how it backfires on a regular basis. That's a very Sagittarius trait, and we need to understand that slow and steady wins the race. And I think that one of the ways that we unlock that in the chart is to look at your 4th house of family. And there's a lot happening in the family dynamic, Christine, which I'm sure that you're aware of by now. We have Jupiter in Pisces, Sun in Pisces, Venus in Pisces, and Mercury in Pisces. That is a stellium, all in the fourth house of family. Your family was very emotional, my dear. Pisces being that mutable water sign, especially with Jupiter. Jupiter is that planet that, again, makes things big. Yeah, so when we find Jupiter in the fourth house of family, the family is not just big, but the family is also big in the emotional department because everything is happening here. You did put the Lord of your chart here, so family is very, very important to you, but we have to understand that just because family is big and you've associated your identity with family on two occasions, both putting Jupiter, the Lord of your chart here, and putting the Sun here, you also need to understand that your rebellious nature, that Sagittarius also tends to be very, very rebellious, is actually a good thing. You know, you don't need to conform. You don't need to feel like that the family is something that you need to inherit and move forward. There are other things in the chart that we need to focus on for your life's purpose. One of them is just putting in an honest day of hard work. You working in the family business is a potential because that North Node in Taurus in the sixth house of work is ruled by Venus and Pisces in the fourth and her exaltation. But again, we need to understand that like your energy is very different from your family's energy. So that sense of self and that sense of identity that would potentially be in the work environment might also create issues in the work environment should you work too close to home. You potentially working in home-based fields like real estate, as well as working from home as well. That's a possibility, especially with that Mercury in Pisces ruling the MC in Virgo up in the 10th. But yeah, the idea of you putting in an honest, hard day's work with that North Node in Taurus, like you've understood in previous experiences how to heal, how to get through stuff, how to, look something in the mouth and understand, like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And now it's time to just kind of keep your head down, flex your muscles a little bit, and really put some of that hypermobile fire to work, that Sagittarius energy, that spunk, that passion, that curiosity, and really just investigate that Taurus North Node in the sixth and really understand what it is to have a normal job. I think that's something that your chart craves, is normality, as opposed to you constantly realizing that you're not like everybody else, but then your family trying to stamp you or brand you with all of this Pisces energy in the fourth and pull you down into those tides. Your Libra moon really wants to give everybody a second chance and really wants to make sure that everything is fair and that everything has a chance to express itself evenly. But you're here to really cut your losses and understand that simple is better. That there is no shame in recognizing the family dynamic is not where you're supposed to be, but also that there are pieces of you that are not always appropriate at any given time. And in fact, if you continue to try to vent or express yourself when that venting and expressing is not appropriate, then you're just going to make situations worse. So we really need to leverage that Pisces moon, or that Libra moon rather, to remind you that there is always a balance to be struck. And sometimes that balance to be struck is you surrendering to the idea of being normal. Yep. So that's the core message. Thank you, Christine, for jumping onto the queue and submitting your chart. I appreciate you. Chart number 3, we're going to talk about Josh. Josh, my man, third stellium of the morning. Are you kidding me? So Josh has 4:43 a.m. birth time in Grapevine. Yep, Lord of the chart retrograde in a second. Goodness gracious, Josh. I see. Little bit of juxtaposition. We've got a sun in Cancer, giving you the emotional side, the mothering side, the nurturing side. Yeah. But then we've got this really fiery Moon in Aries in mutual reception with Mars in Cancer in the second house of finance. And then we've got this Gemini ascendant, which is just all over the place, trying to make connections and intellectual discoveries. But that first house of personality is also connected to the second house of finance with this Mercury in Cancer retrograde ruling the chart. Difficult placements, tricky placements, Josh, but very interesting. I enjoy your sense of creativity and how you've placed your energetics so specifically. The long story short, Josh, is that you're here to master the second house of finance, wealth, resources, time, and energy. You've put 4 of your personal planets here, but you've also put Mercury, the planet that's known to rule the 3 M's, magic, medicine, and money, specifically because the second house is financial related. In the second house, but also make it retrograde. That Mars also making that connection with the moon. The moon is in Aries, Mars is in Cancer. They're in mutual reception, changing signs. You know, you're really here not just to master the idea of money, Josh, but also to teach other people how to master money. I think that the more you stick towards that life purpose, the more you understand that fundamentally you are a teacher. Fundamentally, you're very good at explaining things to other people. Fundamentally, you are somebody that people can trust. You are somebody who's very charismatic. You are somebody who's very approachable as well. A lot of the heat that we would see in that Mars that would make you a little bit too aggressive is tempered by Cancer. So you've got this really nice blend of energetics, but you've strategically placed your planets to make sure that you don't get too out of control, because you can't be chaotic and teach people how to do things. You just can't. And that's going to be something that will constantly repeat throughout the life, is the more you're able to use that Gemini ascendant and kind of chameleon yourself, the easier it's going to be for you to teach people the lessons that they're going to learn throughout the life, whether they want to or not. We have an interesting connection and blend of concepts and planets between the 12th house and the 9th house. So the 9th house of higher learning is going to be pretty difficult, but it is going to be one of the most powerful places that you can find growth. College will not be easy. Higher learning will not be easy. It will be very confusing. It wouldn't surprise me if the minute that you get into that higher college level of the 9th house, you really start to understand how dyslexic you are, how you might have just a different style of learning. We have Neptune, who makes things confusing, Uranus, who makes things unpredictable, in that mentally focused sign of Aquarius, but both of them are retrograde up in that 9th house. Makes for a very turbulent, very confusing 9th house. Also, travel is going to be rather difficult, enriching, but difficult. I would highly recommend that if you do any travel, especially if you plan to study abroad, you need to stick with your guides very closely. Do not leave the group. Otherwise, you will get lost, I promise you. And other healing, you know, when we look at the hero's journey, like there is a certain amount of, in your chart, the idea of getting lost fueling growth. But I would much rather you play it safe. I would much rather you understand that, you know, there are situations that need to be respected, rules that cannot be broken. Yeah, for your safety. You can choose to break them, but not without consequence. Therefore, the rule cannot be broken. Yeah, especially because you do not align with the consequence of your actions. We need to really firmly plant our roots down and make sure that you are not trying to be somewhere you're not, or be someone you're not, because you have so much talent and so much grace when it comes to the 1st, the 2nd, and the 11th houses of self, finance, and social groups. But the more you try to break ranks, and you try to like simultaneously break ranks but conform, like you leading the group because everybody else is leading the group, and following what you think is your own path, but it's not, because it's actually tied to other people's journeys. Like, all of these things not going to be okay for your personal sense of self. So just don't don't tempt fate, Josh. I appreciate you. There are lots of lessons that will need to be learned and unpacked, but those are things that will naturally mature over time. You cannot access them right now. So unfortunately, if you would like to speed up your learning process, and you're just going to have to do it the hard way. There is no way to jumpstart your chart. You have to let it mature, Josh. And you've already got the talents. Like, you came in with all of this good juju, but then a lot of what will clarify this good juju is you constantly throwing yourself into these positions where that good juju, your internal compass, your natural talents are suffocated, smothered, and put to the test. And then you start to realize, oh, I actually don't need any of these tests. They were just here to, show me everything that I had all along, Dorothy. That's kind of the essence of your chart. We do have an interesting placement with Pluto and Sag retrograde in the 7th, ruled by Jupiter and Taurus in the 12th. Relationships will be difficult. They will be much better halfway through the life. But a lot of your relationships, a lot of the people that you will choose to keep close in terms of company will be specifically here to teach you what not to do. Pluto and Sag retrograde in the 7th brings this toxic spontaneity, something that we already talked about kind of in earlier charts, but especially because Jupiter is ruling that Pluto from the 12th house of hidden enemies, from hospitalizations, from jails, from karmic healing, the idea of your relationships being transformative, not necessarily safe. But something that will, again, help to catalyze all of these beautiful Cancer placements that you have in the 2nd house, you understanding your own sense of wealth, your own sense of value, and understanding that you really have all the keys to the dungeon already. Like, you don't need to go searching for them, but because you think you need to prove yourself, because you think you need to put yourself in harm's way in order to develop these skills, you're going to realize what you've had all along. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. Yes, I see your messages. Good morning, Sharon, Paula, everybody on Instagram. I appreciate you. If you would like to be a part of the queue, just send your birth date, place, and exact birth time to me via private message, and I will add you to that queue. We have Karen. Karen was born 6:23 p.m. in Taunton. I think I said that right. Taunton. Let's take a peek. Cancer ascendant, Scorpio moon. Ooh, girl, you got some water in your chart. I'm loving this creativity, though. Ooh, yes, Karen. Karen, I'm a fan of your chart. You know why I'm a fan of your chart? One, because you've got Cancer on the ascendant, and as a double Cancer, I just love it. However, you also have this Scorpio moon, and as a Scorpio ascendant, I absolutely love it. We would get along great, besties, right off the bat. However, you having 2 major personality markers in water placements, as well as the ruler of your chart in Scorpio, co-present with Neptune and Scorpio in the 5th house of creativity, there's a lot here that needs to be unpacked emotionally. You're going to deal with empathy issues. You're going to deal with, girl, why are people calling me? No. Hold on, everybody. Somebody's trying to call me via Facebook because they can't see the live stream. Okay, anyway. So when it comes to Karen, your chart, again, the idea of being overly empathetic, emotions needing to be mastered. Your moon is co-present with Neptune and Scorpio. There's a lot here from a 5th house creativity perspective that I think is important for you to unpack and respect. You've been told your entire life, you're a Sagittarius, you're a Sagittarius, you're a Sagittarius. Girl, you've got more water in your chart than I would like to see for any Sagittarius. So I would highly, highly, highly consider yourself more of a water sign than a fire sign at this point. Oh, that's lovely. Another reason why I'm a fan of your chart, Karen, is because we have Venus and Sagittarius in the 6th house of work, in mutual reception with Jupiter in Libra in the 4th house of family. You'd be excellent at real estate. Absolutely excellent. Especially with Cancer ruling the chart as an archetypal sign of the home. Your Sun in Sagittarius, your Mercury in Sagittarius, your Venus in Sagittarius in the 6th house of work, you're just really good at what you choose to do. Whatever you put your mind to, you just have this natural curiosity, creativity to it. There's a lot of really great solar energy in the chart via Sagittarius. Venus just makes everything better when she's in, especially when she's in Sagittarius. It's that Guinevere archetype. You know, she's very, very sweet and considerate and kind, but also fun and humorous, and all of those Sagittarius qualities. I love it. We do have Uranus and Libra in the fourth house of family, so I think upbringing family wise was just a little bit chaotic, which is why you think it's so important for you to invest in home life now, is because there's this constant understanding of you working in the family dynamic, you working with the home life, because your life was a little bit more upheaval oriented than you would have liked, and you understand the value of a rooted home dynamic. You do really good, not just in real estate, but also Airbnb stuff, like working with travel, foreigners, and the home life, because we've got this Jupiter in Pisces ruling the MC and the North Node in the ninth house of travel and foreigners. You're just really good at taking care of people. I'm such a fan of it. You'd be a great mom, because not only from a fertility perspective, anytime that we see the moon in the fifth house, that's a fertility marker, but also the idea of the moon being in Scorpio, a water sign on the cusp of the fifth house, bringing fertility to the forefront. The ruler of that fifth house is Mars in Aquarius, so unfortunately that there's an association with death in children in the chart, on a lower expression, especially earlier in life before you start to mature certain placements of the chart, which will incur some emotional trauma. However, there is a great respect and entrepreneur energy that does come forward with Mars in Aquarius in the eighth once it matures over time. Saturn in Taurus in the 11th. I love it. You going into business with a spouse, that could be a thing. For sure. I think your chart has such great synastry. Yeah, you tend to surround yourself with very stubborn friends. Very stubborn friends. No, friends don't get more stubborn than a Saturn in Taurus retrograde in the 11th house, Karen. You've really, really decided that your friends are going to be so firm in their convictions, so stabilizing to your chart. And I think it really makes sense, because, you know, it's one thing for you to take care of the world, but you really need to surround yourself with people who can take care of themselves for a change. But yeah, I'm a fan. As long as you keep moving towards that North Node in Pisces in the ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, and work on a lot of your home life stuff, and really start to understand like what it means to both be rooted but strive for something more. It's a great chart combination. It's a nice energetic dynamic that you've carved out for yourself with all of these mutual receptions. There are weak points, but nothing that is too serious. Well, besides this Pluto in Virgo squaring Mercury. But even then, Mercury is ruling the Pluto, so it's not like the weakest part of your chart is this third house of writing, teaching, and communication. It's difficult for you from a public speaking perspective. It is your worst nightmare. However, you will overcome it. You will grow from it. Because again, when your passion is as strong as it is for you, when your emotions take over and they really start to understand that you conveying the message that you're conveying is more important than the fear that you feel. You know, that's how we overcome that third house energy, which is frankly super easy in your chart. Thank you everybody for jumping in. Yes, I see all your messages. I'm glad that everybody is enjoying the forecast, the live stream. We are halfway through. If you would like your chart to be featured in the live stream, all I need is your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I do need that exact birth time because astrology is a science of timing. and only private message me. Do not comment if you would not like your social media presence to be exposed in that way and you would like something a little bit more private. You can always send me a consultation request at scorpiorisingastrology.com. Just click the consultation page and you'll be able to submit the form to request a consult with me one-on-one, and we can do that. I do synastry charts, children, I've done pets, electional stuff, health stuff. It's all kind of in my wheelhouse. So that's that. Thank you all for joining me. The live stream would not be possible without you. Let's talk about our fifth chart in the line, Jennifer. Jennifer was born 7:42 a.m. in Seattle. Let's take a peek. Another stellium. Goodness, this time in Virgo. We're just going through the signs. Ooh. Ooh. Jennifer. Honey, you were so deliberate in these placements. I can't get over it. It's amazing. Okay. So let's unpack Jennifer's chart. We have a Virgo stellium in the first house of self. So we have Venus in Virgo, the Sun in Virgo, the Ascendant in Virgo, and Mercury in Virgo. But what is so interesting about Jennifer's chart is she has the Lord of the chart in the first house, making the personality very intact, but she has some serious quirks, some very, very serious quirks and issues that I'm going to bring up that she's probably not going to like, but they're important to understand. So here we go. Venus, goddess of love, yeah, the planet who is known for her unconditional approach to life and enjoyment and pleasure, is in the sign of Virgo. Virgo is the sign of Venus's detriment. It is the sign that she least likes to be in, and also she is retrograde. Venus is moving backwards. And to make it even more interesting, Venus is in the heart of the sun, an exact conjunction at 3 degrees in Virgo in the first house of self. So the big issue here, Jennifer, is that we have Venus, an archetype who is known to be unconditional, and you have put every conditional stipulation possible on her. And you've tied that to your sense of identity. You've decided that you will live by rules. You have decided that you will live by guidelines. You have decided that you will live by things that you can measure. And girl, let me tell you, Venus does not like to operate like that. She is a feminine force of ultimate empowerment, and you have decided to strip her of all of her unconditionalness. So I respect what you're trying to do in this life, in this go around. I understand it. However, I'm going to challenge you and say that we need to unwrap this Venus. We need to understand that love is not conditional. We need to understand that life is not about playing by the rules. Life is about understanding the rules, for sure, but you cannot take a lovely Venus placement and tell it that it cannot be a Venus placement. And this idea of you compromising your femininity, compromising your goddess nature, compromising all of the things that Venus would want you to triumph for and stand for and be aware of, you're playing by other people's rules, and it's not fair to who you are as a person. There, I said it. Yep. Especially with your moon in Taurus. That Venus is ruling your moon. Yeah? Especially in college, like this higher learning, travel, foreigners, higher education, like you get seriously exposed to some not okay stuff. In the dynamic of the ninth house, South Node is here too. Like you're putting your emotions in all the wrong places. The moon in Taurus should be comfortable, should be easy, should be effortless, should be strong and stable and powerful. And you've put the moon by the South Node, the energy suck of the chart. You've put the moon in being ruled by this compromised Venus. There's so much in the chart that just needs to be softened, that needs to be more graceful, that needs to be less rigid, that needs to be more fluid. And I think that we're really trying to move towards this North Node in Scorpio in the third house of writing, teaching, communication. Like, you know, it's one thing to be a writer, and it's one thing to follow the rules of language, and it's one thing to understand what it means to build a reputation as somebody who is a guide, who is a personality that's trying to help other people through their own experience. But girl, like, we need to get you more in touch with the feelies. We need to get you more emotional. We need to get you less encumbered. We need to get you a little bit more secretive. We need to get you all of these Scorpio tendencies in the third house, writing about things that are deeply personal, shattering boundaries, foregoing the rules. Like, you've really put yourself in a cage, and you've decided that, you know, the ultimate test of your life experience this time around is if you can break out. Like, you're Houdini. Like, that's what you're trying to do. I see it. I see you. You, and I think that it's genius. It's just I'm in awe of your process. I'm in awe of all of the stipulations that you've put on your chart, in order to make sure that you would learn the skills of the ninja of this Scorpio North Node in the third. I think it's terribly dramatic, and I'm such a fan of it. But girl, you just made everything so hard for yourself, and I get it. Like, I get it. There's toxic optimism that you've had to fight, and there's a lack of practicality in the home environment, potential addiction issues. There's this need for you to strive, need for you to be better, need for you to be recognized as the Mars in Gemini literary force that you are. But damn if you didn't put every lock and key in the way of you trying to unwrap yourself from yourself. I'm a fan, but again, we need to soften. We need to loosen. We need to relax into it. You've devil snared yourself. That's a Harry Potter reference. The more you struggle, the worse it gets. We really just need to surrender into some of these softer placements in the chart to excavate your truest potential. Okay, good stuff. Thank you, my dear, for allowing me to rant at you about your chart, Jennifer. Now we're talking about Kat, my love. It's been such a long time. Kat was born at 11:58 a.m. in Ann Arbor. Let's take a peek. Cancer ascendant. Woo! I love it. With the moon in the sixth. Girl, you're such a workaholic. Not just that, but you're addicted to the drama of the work. Ooh, I'm about to call you out, hun. So we have this Cancer ascendant, meaning that the lord of the chart is the moon. The moon is in the sixth house of work, health, and pets. So you've put the lord of your chart in your sixth house of work, making you a workaholic. But not only that, you've also put the moon 1 degree away from Uranus in Sagittarius retrograde. Uranus is that planet of unpredictability, especially going backwards. Like, you're constantly surrounded by these people, places, things from a work environment, especially hypermobile hips from a health environment, weak liver stuff, anemia, especially dietary related anemia, because the Cancer aspect on the ascendant rules the stomach. Like, we've got so many interesting things in your charts that are really saying that, again, you kind of make things harder than they need to be, but you constantly surround yourself with this idea of being overly depleted from your workaholic tendencies. So let's this is something that I tell my friends, because again, the lord of my chart is in the sixth, so we have the same work ethic. Except my ruler of the chart is Mars in Aries, so I have a much more vigorous, intense, fiery fire lord work ethic. But the same rules apply to anybody who has the lord of their chart in the sixth house of work. Is we need to understand that at a certain point, there is not enough effort to conquer the to-do list. There never will be. And for you to constantly be slipping on banana peels in order to try to get this imaginary to-do list done, because there will always be something else on the list, there's issue there that I think we need to understand and unpack. Let's see. What else? We have the Sun in Aries, Venus in Aries, MC in Aries, Mercury in Aries. Mercury and Venus are both retrograde. Another very detrimented Venus. Venus in the 10th house, and this is all up in the 10th house of success. Wow, honey. The idea of success being taken from you because you're a woman. Like, that's a thing. Feminine disempowerment. You've put Venus in the opposite sign of her rulership. Venus likes to be in Libra. She's in Aries, the opposite sign. She's also retrograde. Mercury, the planet of communication, also retrograde. Like, you go in guns a-blazing and you have all of this hyper masculine energy with this moon in Sag and this sun in Aries in its exaltation, and all it does is get you into more trouble, and you think that it's because you lack this softer approach, but it's not. It's the fact that you're approaching it kind of wrongly. You're trying to use the planets in your chart in a way that they're not supposed to be used. Like, there are only so many bombs you can throw at a situation, and I'm calling you out because you're a gamer and I know that you do this. The idea of you can't throw enough bombs at a situation in order to kill the enemy. Like, you have to actually use strategy. You actually have to get in there and learn weaknesses and learn strengths and play unfair. And you think that just, barreling down the door is going to do it, and unfortunately it's not. Like, you're here to learn especially how to work in groups, how to be a team player, and all of these independent placements. Like, part of the reason why you're slipping on banana peels is because you're the one who's eating bananas. The end. Yeah? You need to understand, especially with this Mars and Taurus conjoin the North Node in the 11th house of friendships, in mutual reception with this detrimented Venus, that you don't have to do it alone, honey, darling. So when we look at unpacking the different aspects of your chart, I really think it's important for you to understand that, yes, honoring your creativity, honoring your own personal process, making sure that you can do things streamlined, that you don't shoot yourself in the foot when you're doing all of these tasks that seem terribly unmanageable. There is such a thing as asking for help. I'd like you to Google it. There is such a thing as using tact and strategy. I'd like you to Google that too. And understand that although your first impulse is to be impulsive, yeah, there is a smarter way to do things. And I think that the Mars and Taurus can join your North Node in the 11th. You working in teams, you working with groups, you working with people who can temper your fire, yeah, that's going to be a lot easier for you in the long run, instead of you just running in guns a-blazing, working with a Venus and a Mercury retrograde in the 10th. It's not ideal. I don't want that for you. Yes. So that's that. And the spouse that you're going to choose, like, you're naturally attracted to people who are grounded, who are mysterious, who are people who can really get you to, like, pause and take a moment and enjoy the fantasy, and enjoy not the fantasy that derails you, but the fantasy that actually leads to productive thinking. But if you're charging so far ahead and activating all these fire placements, then you're not going to experience what life has to offer, and you're certainly not going to experience things like the pleasure of the 5th house with Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node here. That's a really difficult stack that you've put in the 5th house of children, families, creativity, sexuality, children, parents. Sorry, not families. Although we don't even need to get into the family dynamics, because that Venus in Aries retrograde is ruling the 4th house of family. That's a military association if I ever did see one. But yeah, so there's lots of stuff that we could unpack. But again, just the idea of you asking for help, softening your edges. If you think that you want to go in guns a-blazing, don't. And I love you. Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Susan. Good morning, Susan. Good morning, Lisa. Good morning, everybody who's joining on Instagram. Thank you so much. How many other charts do we have? We have 2 more charts. Let's talk about Ania. I think that's how you pronounce it. At 1:52 p.m. in Canberra. Yep, let's take a peek, shall we? Hmm. Interesting. What an the third girl, the third Venus in a row. That's in her not happy place. Oh, goodness. I can't with these charts. Y'all need to learn about Venus. Go Google Venus. Google her myths. Google her feminine glory. Google she who is lovely and abundant and divine. Because obviously the last three charts need a mythology lesson about how to embrace the goddess. Um, so we've got, but I digress. So we have the ascendant. We have the ascendant in Aquarius. The ascendant in Aquarius is ruled by Saturn in Pisces retrograde in the second. The chart ruler being Saturn does give certain issues right off the bat that mature later in life. I love personally, like as an astrologer and as somebody who has Saturn prominently placed in the chart, I really enjoy Saturn ruling the ascendant. Why? Because Saturn is a boss. Yeah? You hate the boss when you're younger because they're telling you what to do and they're trying to form you into the person that you will become. But as you start to mature and as you start to become the boss and start to step into your own power, you're like, oh, I understand. Some people are just off their rocker and they need to be told what to do. And that's very much the case with your chart. But because we have Saturn in Pisces retrograde, the ruler of your chart being retrograde in the second house of finance does bring financial issues to the surface. You were also born with a full moon in Pisces in the second house. Being born in a full moon in a water sign makes you highly emotional, which is something that a lot of people who have Aquarius on the ascendant, a lot of people who have a sun in Virgo like you do, those are not typically emotional signs. Yeah. But it's all with this moon, because your sun is in Virgo and your moon is in Pisces. That full moon in Pisces in a water sign just gives this flood of empathy, which frankly I think is good to soften you. It is needed. But because the moon and because Saturn is retrograde in the second house of finance, we need to understand that your financial wealth is directly connected to your emotional health. Let me say that again. The status of your bank account seriously impacts you on an emotional level. And you might not understand that logically, but I'd like you to understand that around the first of the month, when you need to pay all the bills and the bank account balance drops, so do your emotions. Yeah? Which is why it's so important for you to save, for you to gain financial resource, for you to study accounting and finance, for you to, especially because the sun in Virgo is ruled by Mercury and Libra up in the ninth with the MC, I think you getting an accounting degree or at least taking accounting classes, something that will be very helpful. Yeah, I really just think that it's very important for you to understand your financial situation, because you've told yourself this time around that you would be struggling in that area, very emotional in that area, and it needs to be unpacked. Plus, the moon is ruling this Mars in Cancer from the second in the sixth. I'm not really a fan of that. Let's think about why that is for 2 seconds. Why is that? Why did you do that to yourself? Especially with, oh, what? This Mars is opposing Neptune from the 12th, and it's squaring this Mercury in Libra up in the ninth? Girl. No, ma'am. Why did you do that? I'm so in awe of your process. So Mars, that planet of action, in a sign that he's not comfortable in, the sign of his detriment in Cancer in the sixth house of work, health, pets. From a health perspective, acid reflux is something just to be aware of, that are related to actually deeper filtration issues in the kidneys and you downing too many energy drinks because you'd like to perform on a high level, but especially earlier in life, you don't have the energy to do that. Because again, you're still trying to master your emotions, so you down the energy drinks, erode the stomach lining, etc., etc. Caffeine or anything that erodes the stomach. I'm not just picking on energy drinks or or caffeine here. Um, yeah, you've decided that a lot of your personal work, the work that you do on a day-to-day basis, is going to be very much a healing journey for you. Um, yeah, like you've really stacked the odds from a work perspective. Like when we see the sixth house, ninth house, and 12th house squaring and opposing each other, it's just the idea of the sixth house of work is angry at the ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, who is also angry at the 12th house of hidden enemies, jails, hospitalizations, and karmic healing. Um, and a lot of your conflict is really about how do I spread my energy? You know, do I need to learn in order to value? Do I need to just keep my head down and work in order to bring value? Or do I need to actually do some deeper karmic healing work in order to bring value? And unfortunately, there is no right answer. It's just a yes to all of that, because you need to learn how to work, but you also need to learn how to learn how to learn. And then you also need to learn how to heal. And I think that this is why all of the Scorpio stuff in the 10th house of success is so important for you, is because you mastering your emotions and you mastering the financial placements and the higher learning placements in your chart is really going to activate a sense of deep proficiency, deep knowing, yeah. But you're going to need to sacrifice a lot of the emotional aspects because of this Venus as well. This Venus in Scorpio in her detriment, you know, you having so much of a watery energy already, you having so much of this overabundance of fluid in the chart, and then you get into a work environment where you actually need to kind of put pedal to the metal. Like you can't swim fast enough to keep up with everybody. You need to drain some of this fluid and become much more streamlined. You need to ice yourself out, almost, is a good way to think about it, in order to achieve this success that you've promised yourself you would, via your chosen profession, in the financial sector. So yes, lots of interesting stuff in this chart for sure. Yeah, good stuff. We need to unpack that though, one-on-one, I think, my dear. Alrighty. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you jumping on and comments. I can't read them all because we're going. But we've got one more chart to do. Thank you, everybody on Instagram, for your feedback as well. Let's talk about Marissa. Marissa is our last chart. She was born at 11:31 a.m. in Santa Rosa. Let's take a peek. Oh, I'm already a fan. Girl, are you freaking kidding me? A Venus in retrograde. What? What? What is up with y'all and mistreating your Venus this morning? I'm so disappointed in you. She deserves better, and you deserve better. If you take nothing at all from this reading, cheers, you deserve better. But alas, getting back to Marissa. So we have the ascendant in Leo. The ascendant in Leo is ruled by the sun in Gemini in the 11th. I absolutely love this placement because it takes that solar energy of Leo, puts it in the airy communicative sign of Gemini, and sticks it right in the 11th house of friendships and social groups. And it's just such a charismatic placement, Marissa. You do so well when you're in a group dynamic, especially because you've got Mercury in Gemini here in the 11th house, co-present with the sun, out of combustion, and Venus is here, although Venus is freaking in retrograde, which is a thing, especially because Venus is ruling your moon and your Jupiter. We need to talk about this. So when a planet is retrograde in the chart, it means that the qualities that are naturally given by that planet are still present, yeah, but they are often acting against the person, or they are the exact issue that needs to be worked through in the chart. In this case, Venus ruling qualities like femininity, like love, like abundance, like relaxation, like from a medical astrology standpoint, the cold wet tissue state. But this Venus retrograde at the edge of Gemini, which frankly, honey, you are getting a rude wake-up call right now with everything happening in Gemini, moving through your 11th house of friendships, about to conjoin your natal Venus. Like, ooh, Can't even. But the sun in Gemini, I think, remediates a little bit of that. We do have this Venus in Gemini in the 11th house, ruling the moon in the 3rd, moon in Libra in the 3rd, which I enjoy seeing because the moon is at 21 degrees, making a loose trine to Gemini, Mercury and Gemini in the 11th. And I like it when the 11th house and the 3rd house play nice together because they're both communication-oriented houses. The 11th house in terms of group dynamics and friendships and social gatherings, and the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. I like that synastry very much. But because Venus in Gemini is retrograde, some of those relationships are still sticky. Like, you're still learning core values of empathy. You're still learning that you can't just talk somebody into liking you. Although you do have all this charisma, although you do have all of this persuasion in your chart, I think it's also important for you to understand that sometimes you need to do that thing that a lot of people have 2 ears for. It's called listening. Yeah. I said it, honey. Because that's one thing that Venus does very, very well when she's properly placed, is she allows people to speak. She allows people to interact with her. She allows people, and for the exchange to be even. Yeah? But you've decided to take this Venus in your 11th house of friendships, ruling your moon and your Jupiter in the 10th of success, and you've decided to put her backwards in the chart and say, you know what, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to be my best self and live my best life and understand that I am destined for greatness, which you are, by the way. However, the greatness that you will achieve will be highly detrimental unless you learn how to listen, because you won't be able to steer clear of the red flags that other people see, which you don't. Because unfortunately, one of the things with all of this charisma in your chart that we see with the 1st, the 11th, and the 3rd houses is that your charisma will get in the way of your own awareness. And you'll start to really understand this as you mature throughout life. And you'll start to understand when you're talking all the time and when you're casting this spell of communication over people. Yeah. And you're not receiving their words back at you, receiving their feedback and listening. That's a recipe for disaster. Yeah. Because soon you're going to be talking to an empty room and then you're going to wonder where everybody went. Yeah. You are supposed to be talking to large groups, by the way. You are supposed to be very much involved with group projects, humanitarian efforts, and being very, very famous and well known for that. We do have Jupiter in Taurus, very close to the MC in the 10th house of success, ruled by your Venus in the 11th. There's a lot of good potential in the chart here. We just need to remember that although you are an excellent spokesperson, although you are an excellent communicator, although you are somebody who really, really knows how to get a job done, yeah, you do need to learn how to listen. Stellar work ethic, for sure. This Saturn in Capricorn retrograde in the 6th house of work, as well as Neptune in Capricorn and retrograde in the 6th house of work. I think that, you know, you having a day job isn't something that's it's not super productive, but it is very grounding, and it will present as very restricting until you realize that, again, the groups that you surround yourself with in your day job are the exact people who you're supposed to be motivating and helping. Oh, you just had a natal conjunction with your Mars in Pisces. That was pretty fun, up in the 8th house. Oh, interesting. There could have actually been a little bit of a death association recently too, because the Mars being triggered just a little bit with that North Node being present. The North Node in the 8th is understanding business. It's understanding, but also understanding things like death, understanding things that are impermanent, that you can grow to a certain extent, but at a certain point, like the stock market's going to do stuff that you can't control. People are going to do stuff that you can't control. Life ends and you can't control it. But there are always going to be new beginnings, I think, and that's just lesser points in the chart. One thing that I didn't see before is this Venus that's in detriment is opposing almost exactly. They're at 29 degrees, but they're just 4 seconds off from each other. this Uranus and Sagittarius retrograde in the fifth house of creativity. And again, it's really about, you have so many amazing ideas, honey. You have this natural gift to be creative. You have all of these air and fire placements that are just working for you in the chart. But again, if you're not a team player, if you don't learn how to listen, if you don't learn how to share your vision with the world in a way that's palatable to other people, then you're not going to use the greatest potential of your chart. And at this point, we're kind of circling. So I think that that's the primary message of the chart for sure. Cool. Thank you everybody for watching. If you would like to schedule a private consult, you can always go to ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. If you would like to be in the queue, just private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time, and we will get you on the list. It has been another lovely experience sharing astrology with you. This is something that I've been studying for a long time and I enjoy very regularly. Follow my daily forecast posts on Instagram and Facebook. Follow the stories that I make on TikTok with the videos that are super fun. And I will probably do my next live video on Wednesday. But until next time, may the stars be ever in your favor.